Have you been hearing different predictions about various disasters that may occur this year, 2026, and some of them potentially happening quite soon? So I'm posting this on February 9th or 10th. And have you wondered why different channelers can get very different information from spirit? And why some channelers, guides, or beings that they channel haven't mentioned any of these things? So this was really bugging me, and I asked Spirit to help me understand why this is and to help understand predictions better. And I'm going to share everything that Spirit shared with me in this video, and I hope it helps you gain a better understanding of not only psychic predictions, but how channeling in general works. So you come away with more discernment, and more importantly, you understand how powerful your creative power and vibration are when it comes to creating the reality we see. So forgive me if I'm looking off like in a weird way in the distance. I've got notes behind me on my computer monitor so I can kind of stay on topic because I have a lot I want to share and I don't want to ramble too much. So as far as these predictions go, I'm aware of about 5 different predictions, 5 different channelers who were sharing kind of similar but also very different predictions for 2026. And I know there's probably a lot more out there. And in this video, the point isn't to dive into these predictions and dissect them and see what they're all about. Really, the point of me sharing this is to help understand predictions in general and how channeling works. And Spirit has a few things that they want to say about all of this. And I don't want to use names, okay? So I don't intend to throw any shade at anyone. I'm not criticizing these channelers, and I'm not saying that they're wrong, their predictions are wrong, they're deceitful, or anything like that. I'm a channeler too, and I think that every channeler and psychic will tell you that they know that they're human and that their messages aren't necessarily 100% accurate. And I think most channelers are good, honest people, and they believe that they're simply the messenger. And that is true. But Spirit helped me understand exactly what being a messenger means and why it's not quite as simple as just delivering a message from Spirit. So let's start by talking about what channeling is and what a channeler does. So in the simplest terms, channeling is receiving a message from Spirit. And there's basically 2 types of channelers. There's a conscious channel, who is the one that receives information from Spirit and then delivers the information. A trance channel is where the Spirit, like consciousness, comes into the channeler's body and delivers the message themselves. So the channeler just kind of puts their consciousness to the side in like a deeper way than a conscious channel does. And you might think that messages from a trance channel would maybe be more pure because the Spirit is the one delivering the message. But Spirit is saying that's not really accurate because even though the channel is not fully consciously aware, their brain is still active. Your brain has to be active or you wouldn't be able to deliver the message. If your brain's not active, you're dead, basically. So the other thing, and the brain is involved because that's where we form our words and our sentences. So in order to deliver the message, your brain is active. So that's the first piece. And even though the channeler is not fully conscious, that doesn't mean that their subconscious is not playing a role. In fact, when the conscious mind is suspended, the subconscious automatically opens and it's even more accessible by us. The other thing that our unconscious mind does is it enables us to access the collective unconscious. And that's a really important part of this, and that's something that Spirit is going to talk more about in just a minute. Or I'm going to talk about more with you because this is all information that Spirit shared with me. So we can't say that even trance channeling is purely just spirit, with no input from the channeler, because we know that the brain, the mind, the subconscious, and the collective unconscious all get involved in these messages. So that's the first distinction that I want to make, and probably the most important, is that all channeled messages have some level of input from the channeler's mind, as well as their subconscious and the collective unconscious. So that means that no message is 100% purely spirit sourced. And, I think there's a tendency sometimes when we see channelers, we tend to put them on a pedestal, or put their messages on a pedestal, like they're coming straight from, like it's words coming straight from God and or a spiritual being, or whoever they are channeling. And that's not really the case. And Spirit had a lot to say about what is really happening in channeling, and why predictions aren't really what we might think they are. And Spirit is, you're going to hear me repeat some iteration of what I just shared a couple of times. And I was going back through my notes, and I was going to cut some of them out. And Spirit said, no, I need to repeat this message more than once. So it lands, sometimes you have to hear things more than once, or a couple different ways for it to make sense. So we're just going to go with that. So here's where people might say, well, multiple potentialities exist, and maybe they're just picking up on different ones. But then I came back and said, well, then why doesn't Spirit say that? Why doesn't Spirit say, hey, this is just a possibility I'm sharing with you? Why give the exact date, for example, of some event happening? So let me talk a little bit about these particular predictions that prompted this video. So just as an example, there's one going around that this channeler said on February 18th, there's going to be this big event, and it's going to be really devastating. And then another channeler said on February 16th, there's going to be a cyber attack. And, the dates are close, but they're very different kinds of events. The one on the 18th was talking about an earthquake. The one on the 16th was talking about a cyber attack. And that this cyber attack was going to take down the power grids around the world in many places. And she said, this is going to happen. She said that multiple times in her message, this is set in stone. And something else that's sort of related to this power grid disaster is something going around in the space weather community about, people who track the sun's activity and that sort of thing. And right now the sun is extremely active, and they're watching this sunspot area. And there is a potential for what's called a Carrington event. And basically that is when there's a coronal mass ejection from the sun that is of such magnitude that it would be catastrophic if it were to happen today. There was one that happened in 1859, and that's how it got its name. But if one were to happen today, it would be really devastating. So that's also kind of similar, and seems kind of to be going along with this power grid idea. So now we're getting all these different types of events and similar dates. And then there's a few other messages that I've seen that talk about something happening in May or June, and maybe by August. And so there's just all this different information and predictions floating around out there. And the one common thread that runs through all of these is that they're meant to be a catalyst for this shift that we're going through at this time from the third to the fifth dimension. And that's one thread that's going through. And this will make more sense in just a few minutes as Spirit kind of brings out more details of this message. So what is going on with these messages? Why are they all different yet similar? Is it because details are just getting lost in translation? Is it because some channelers are just stronger channelers? Yes, but there's more to it, Spirit is saying, and that's what we're going to get into next. So Spirit wants to talk first a little bit about the mechanics of channeling and how it works, and that will help you understand better how predictions come about. So basically in channeling, you have two conscious beings. You've got Spirit and the channeler. Spirit only exists as energy. The channeler has both an energetic component and also a physical body, physical tools, basically. You could call like our brain, our vocal cords, our mouth, all tools that help us communicate. Spirit doesn't have those things, so they can't form words. And, words are language, and that is something that is a unique capability that only humans have. Humans are the only ones that have the language in the way that we experience language through like words and speaking and writing. So what happens in channeling is that Spirit is sending information in an energetic form to the consciousness of the channeler. And this energetic information, the way Spirit showed it to me, is like it's a piece of like software, computer software. So they gave me like this analogy where this information from Spirit, like Spirit has their own kind of language, and they have to transform or convert their language into a kind of piece of information that can be translated by the channeler through their brain. So it's like they turn this information into like a coded piece of software. They were showing me just like a computer software program is written. I don't know a whole lot about how that works, but I know there's like binary codes and things, and there's different computer languages like Java and C++, okay, just as an example of some computer software programs. And those programs get converted into code. And then that's what the computer, like hardware, translates into the output. And Spirit is saying that this process of channeling works the same way. So Spirit does not speak in words like we do, because they don't have the physical tools that we have to do that. So they don't literally speak words like, hey, I have a message for you, and you're hearing their words. You perceive it that way because your brain receives this like package of information, this data, these codes, and it happens, this transfer happens, and the transfer and the translation happen like lightning fast. So it seems like Spirit is speaking to us, but it's just that your brain has translated this information package that they've sent to you, and you've translated it into words, pictures, feelings. We have all of these different senses as humans that we can use to translate data. And it's the same thing with sensory information that we take in from our environment. Our brain is key to translating all of that. Sound and music and language and everything, touch, sensations, everything is translated into meaning by the brain. So I'm getting off track, so let me check my notes here. So it really does seem like when you're a channeler, and it does seem this way to me as a channeler, that Spirit is speaking directly to me. So I'm very clairaudient. I receive my messages as words in my mind. I also see pictures. I'm also clairvoyant. So I will sometimes see pictures or like little short, almost like little clips, like movies or video clips. That's my primary like modes of translating information. And when I'm channeling, it just seems like it's all coming right from Spirit. It's words, it's pictures, and I'm receiving it. And as I'm receiving the information, I write it down. some people will receive the information and then just speak it. So I'm talking about like a conscious channel now. They will say, I'm hearing spirit say this, and they're speaking it. Sometimes they speak like as spirit, but it's not like a trance channel. But they might relay that this is what spirit is giving me. And it's happening so fast, just like with a computer. You know, you type some things on the computer and it's a couple clicks and then bam, you have information. If you've ever used ChatGPT, like AI is a perfect example of this. It's just as fast when you are communicating with spirit. You type something in ChatGPT and you hit enter, like you ask a question and you hit enter, and it's literally seconds later, you have this whole document of information. Like it translates it so fast. And so when you're channeling, it does seem like spirit is speaking or sending you words or pictures and that sort of thing. So spirit is saying at this point, can you see how messages can get lost in translation? And remember that the brain, when it's in this super relaxed state that you need to be in to receive these messages from spirit, your consciousness, even though it's very relaxed, you're very tapped into the subconscious and the collective unconscious. So you're not just putting this message together from what spirit's giving you. There's other factors that are coming into it too. Like there's data from several places that come in and mix with the data from spirit and with your brain and the unconscious and all of that into a single message. So this is a really imperfect process. So next, spirit wants to talk about this subconscious and collective unconscious and how they influence the messages that we receive. And it's why messages aren't the exact literal words of spirit. There is no way to completely shut off your subconscious or your access to the collective unconscious. They're always running in the background. And we just don't realize that they're there because it's subconscious and unconscious. But it's always there influencing our thoughts and our vibration, our emotions, all of that. And spirit just wants us to understand that as people who listen to channel messages and people who are channelers themselves, just to be aware that the subconscious and collective unconscious that we are always tapped into, and even more so when you're channeling, are always impacting the message on some level. And this is why we need to take messages with a grain of salt. Sorry, I was looking at my messages notes again, and it's just kind of reiterating again that this whole blend happening, and don't forget the brain, spirit is saying, and that has to be tapped into also, because the channeler needs to have vocabulary and knowledge and wisdom in order to bring through the message from spirit. So the thing with the collective unconscious that spirit wants me to point out is that, especially at this particular point in time, it is especially heavy with fear and anxiety. That, these thought forms that are kind of floating out in like the fourth dimensional space where the collective unconscious lives, where the Akashic records live. Like there's tons and tons of information and history that we are constantly tapping into. And as channelers, we are very sensitive to energy, and energy exists everywhere. And so we have to be aware that we're tapping into all of these different places where we're getting information. And with the current fear and anxiety that is really reaching like a crescendo on the planet at this time, people, when they're channeling, whether they're aware of it or not, and most of the time we're not aware because this is an unconscious process, you are picking up on these energies and thought forms, and they color the messages that we're receiving. And that might be why we are translating messages sometimes that are a little bit like gloom and doom. And Spirit is also saying that something kind of new that people who are awakened and who are expanding in consciousness are now doing is accessing their multi-dimensional nature. So I'm sure you realize that time isn't linear and everything is happening in the now. So what we think of as past lives are happening now, simultaneously with this current life. And as we expand our consciousness more and more, we are able to tap into these other lives that we're living, but they are in all different places and times. So they may feel like past memories, or they are of different times. So, for example, a channeler may tap into a time similar to the one we're going through right now, like say the fall of Atlantis. And maybe they're picking up like disasters that happened at that time, and it's coloring their messages that they're receiving now. And it's coming through as feeling like they're picking up on an impending disaster or something like that. And maybe they're just tapping into this other lifetime in conjunction with the fear and anxiety that is so prevalent right now in the unconscious, and you're bringing that in. And Spirit is saying sometimes what they're doing is, let me see if I can put this into words, because I don't have this in my notes, but this is coming through right now. Like, sometimes what Spirit is trying to deliver is they're using the word, or I'm translating it into the word, like warning, that our thoughts and vibration, we're not aware of where we're at. Like, we are not realizing that we're in a space of fear and anxiety. And because we're trying to shift into the fifth dimension, we really want to be more conscious of where our thoughts and where our attention is going, where our vibration is going. And there's this really strong, and I've been getting this in my own channeled messages, like constant reminders of pay attention to what your thoughts and your vibration, your emotions, all of that are doing, because you're a conscious creator. Sometimes you're an unconscious creator. And actually we're both. You can be a conscious creator if you become aware of what your vibration is doing. You can be more in control. You can say, hey, I'm catching myself. I'm getting caught up in the news and the fear and anxiety that is all around me. And I don't want to create more of that. You realize that everything happens first in vibration and energy. And what gets created out of that is what we see in our physical reality. So if you want to create the new earth, if you want to create something different, something better that we would label better than what we're experiencing right now, then we need to be in a high vibration. We need to be in a very different mindset and attitude in order to create something new. So Spirit is sending through to a lot of people who can, capture these messages. And it's something we can all do. We're all spirit beings, so we can communicate with other spirit beings. It's just a skill that has to be developed. And more people are, because they're opening their consciousness and raising their vibration, are able to do this more and more, and they're not even realizing that they're doing this. And Spirit is coming through with these sort of like warnings, like, hey, you need to pay attention to your vibration. You're getting into this fear zone, and you're just going to create more of what you already are seeing in that space. So all of these pieces of information are kind of getting jumbled up a little bit, Spirit is saying, and these messages are sometimes coming out as a warning of some kind of impending disaster, and it's almost like Spirit saying, no, you don't want to create a disaster, so I'm trying to get you to see and become aware of where your energy is right now. I hope that makes sense. It's making sense in my mind, but I don't know if it came out clearly there. Let me know in the comments if that's not clear. Okay, so I really got off track there because I wasn't expecting to say that. So circling back to the predictions, Spirit said we are in the time of the great shift. And sensitive beings, and this is something I wrote down that I channeled, so I'm going to really read this right now. Sensitive beings are aware that Mother Earth is shifting into the fifth dimension, as are we. And just as we need to release lower density energy from our physical vessels in order to ascend, so must she. So must she. She is a conscious being with her own physical form, right? So the earth is the physical form, and she is a conscious being. And she needs to also release these lower density vibrations. And Spirit is saying that channelers may be interpreting messages about her own release process and her shift that's happening as a physical event. But it may be more metaphorical. And again, we don't really know. You know, we're imperfect channelers, and maybe some of these things will happen. Disasters happen all the time, and this is going to be something else that Spirit shares in just a minute that I'm going to read to you from my channeled messages. So I'm not saying that none of these things may happen. And this is the other thing that I wanted to share is just as a good practice, it makes sense to be prepared for any kind of eventuality, right? Just being a human means being prepared, right? If you live in a particular area that's prone to floods, then you have certain preparations in place. If you are in an area that's prone to earthquakes, then you have certain preparations in place. So it just makes common sense to be prepared for anything. And right now, you know, like the world is a little bit crazy and chaotic, and like anything can happen. Confirmation. So it just makes sense to be prepared, and it's really not necessary to have to hear a message that something's going to happen in order to go ahead and get prepared, right? Like, this is something we should always be doing, Spirit is saying. Okay, so the other thing that Spirit pointed out was that channeling is still a relatively rudimentary form of communication between conscious beings, and that it will become easier for us to send and receive messages telepathically as we continue to evolve into a more advanced life form. And Spirit has been showing me that it's going to be something that just becomes second nature, no different than how we take things in from, like, with our physical senses. Our subtle senses are going to be like fully operational alongside our physical senses. So it's going to be like this whole new way of communicating with one another, with other conscious life forms. That's way into the future, but that is still something that we are evolving into. And right now, like, channeling is just like this imperfect way that we communicate with Spirit. So again, Spirit just wants us to understand that channeled messages are not literal direct words from Spirit. They are a conglomeration of pieces of information that the channeler is taking in from a multitude of sources, much of which are subconscious or unconscious, and they're forming them into a message. So just to keep that in mind as you're listening to these messages. So I have two channeled messages that I want to end this video with that I received from Spirit and my brain and all the other parts. This really, like, opened things up for me because, you know, when you are a channeler and you start receiving like this information and really working with it and showing up every day with Spirit and just kind of communicating together and developing this relationship, you don't really know what it's all about. And I just felt like this was really, really helpful and enlightening for me. And I hope it's been that way for you too. So the first message that I received was, disasters are not imminent because nothing is written in stone. Light workers are here to assist with the shift in consciousness in many ways, and some groups, including yours, have as one of their roles to be a conduit for high frequency, calming energy to be sent into the earth. This role was accepted by your soul when the Interplanetary Council met to come up with a plan for Mother Earth to make her final push into the fifth dimension as smooth as possible. Because the divine plan for Earth always included the participation of humanity, lightworkers were tasked with serving as a sort of doula to assist Mother Earth with high vibrational support to ease her birth into the fifth dimension. She is in the final pushing stages. So a doula, if you're not familiar, is just someone that assists women in childbirth. So the second message is realize you are a powerful being. You have the divine spark of God within you that enables you to co-create your reality. Use your vibration and creative power to create what it is you wish to experience. Do not underestimate the power of your frequency. Block, delete, ignore anything that lowers your vibration. Get it high and keep it high. Your physical body is a unique vessel that acts as a conduit for various frequencies. Choose and embody the highest frequency you can, and then go out into the world and share it with every living being, including Earth herself. It makes an enormous difference to the final result. So, I'm going to leave this message here with you today. I hope you found something of value. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I would really love to hear what you think about this, if this makes sense, if you already knew all of this. Let me know. I'd love to hear anything you have to say. And if you know anyone who might benefit from hearing this message, please share it with them. And if this message resonated with you, I invite you to become part of this community of lightworkers that I'm building here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon. Bye.